That will be in this week.
Sorry.
You have it different.
I don't know. I'm not big enough to say two. No, I don't even remember what day I'm supposed to do it.
All right, I call the meeting to order. We'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I just want to start off by welcoming all of our colleagues from the city here tonight. We appreciate you coming. We understand that this is not a normal meeting night for you, so it's duty above and beyond the call. And some of you, I hear, worked a lot of hours with the Apple Pumpkin Festival, which I hear was a great success. So congratulations to that. The agenda is pretty short and sweet here. I mean, we're here to discuss the bond. And we're really open up questions first from all of you, and then we'll have questions from the audience if there are any. So with that, unless somebody else has something, I'll turn it over to Mr. Hilderly, and we'll go over the presentation on the bond. Mr.
All right,
Hilderly?
very good. Sound is working, that's good. I will be giving a presentation tonight from the podium when I need to be, but I'll also move around. I'm a little more comfortable when I move around. Plus, our office has a steps competition. So the more I wander back and forth, the higher I go in that competition. So it's dual purpose for me tonight. As President Rosero said, we're very happy to have members of the City Council here tonight and City Manager Swallow to hear the presentation. We were together in this room in January of this year. I don't know if it seems like a long time ago or just yesterday, but I have done this presentation many times, and each time I think I learned something new, not only about what we're doing, but what people are wondering. And I hope that that's the case tonight as I present, that we can answer as many questions as possible, not only for you and the members of our gallery, but anybody picking up the live stream this evening. So thank you for coming and welcome. I'm going to start out by talking about our informational website, which is very simple to remember. It's tpsbond.com. And on your table, there is a small business card that has information on the front. And if you flip to the other side, there is a QR code that can be scanned and takes you to the website. So anything that I mentioned this evening, if you want more information about, that will take you directly to a lot of the stuff that I'll be talking about in detail. tpsbond.com. It goes through the why, the what, and the when with details about each of those things and a glossary of photographs and then finally the frequently asked questions section. And as I said, each time I make this presentation, people come up with new things that they're wondering. So that actually stays alive and we continue to add to it as needed. Under the why, the thing that I'd like to start with tonight is just a short informational video, because I think that it shines an overall light on the project in a quick way, and then I'll do a deeper dive into a presentation following that. So let's start with the program, the video put together on the program. Hopefully we'll get sound. Could we get sound, Mr. Knight?
Ensuring it's safe, efficient, and effective. The Board of Education has approved the placement of an $88 million bond on November 8th election ballot. The bond is split into two proposals. This bill will share some backs above bond and its proposed projects. When voters approve a bond, school districts are able to obtain financing for major construction projects. Our bond request was developed by a committee made up of local residents, educators, and district staff. After the community voted down the May 3rd 7.2 mill renewal, Tecumseh Public School back to the community for feedback. Following that feedback, the district developed a new plan consisting of 2 proposals. Proposal 1 would generate approximately $62 million. The highlights of this proposal include a brand new 135,000 square foot school that would house kindergarten through 4th grade students. This one central location will replace our aging early and intermediate learning centers, which are over 60 years old and are currently underutilized and unfit for reinvestment. The EOCs and ILCs are still operating with some of the same equipment as when they opened decades ago. Many of the updates are short-term upgrades and just a band-aid. Consolidating into one building for some of our youngest students will be more efficient and provide the district with operational savings for years to come. Also part of Proposal 1 is district-wide security upgrades. These new security measures will completely revamp the design of our entrances to Tecumseh High School and middle school, providing more safety for our students and staff. The bond program would allow the district to equip every school with modern security upgrades, including secure entries. Last on this proposal is a new music addition to the high school. Partially funded by donations, the addition would be added on to the north end of the building. Proposal 2 would generate approximately $26 million. This plan calls for updates to Tecumseh Community Pool, along with site and infrastructure needs throughout the district. Community Pool needs some serious infrastructure upgrades. To address these needs, a bond would go towards repairs and improvements to locker rooms, fixtures, plumbing, air quality, and boilers. Proposal 2 would also take care of parking and traffic improvements at Tecumseh Middle School, along with infrastructure and security upgrades. A new competition gymnasium with capacity for all students would be added to Tecumseh High School. These critical updates to our facilities are not wants, but needs. The district has identified $18 million worth of critical infrastructure needs in the next 5 years. This bond would preserve general fund dollars for programs, learning, and teacher salary. This November 8th, coming back to the community with 2 proposals and 1 goal: to provide the best future for our children. Don't forget, you can vote on both proposals. You can learn more about the bond and our proposed projects at www.tpsbond.com or call our central office at 517-423-2167.
Again, that video is on the website under the Y tab, so if that's something that you're interested in sharing with others, it's very easy to find under that first tab. Simple click, half page down, and the video is right there. Lots more on the website. If you click on any of these tabs, it takes you to the information that I'll refer to in just a few minutes about each building and what the projects are in the next 5 years that need to be done, and why we're projecting this bond project to be more efficient for our future. So I think you're able to visit that website and take a look at that information. As we mentioned in the video, safety, efficiency, and effective education is what we're looking for out of this current project. And on November 8th, we're hoping that we get the support that we know is out there. We need to find people to come to the polls to support it. So to get a little bit more into the detail of the program, Proposal 1, the first thing there is the security. If you enter any of our buildings right now, you know that you have to come in through the door system and somebody will buzz you into the building. But actually, once you're inside the building, you have unlimited access before you could possibly be challenged by the bell. And that's because the buildings were built at a time when we didn't worry or think about those things in our school buildings. Nowadays, we absolutely put that at the front of our minds. So the first part of the new project is security systems, camera and buzzer systems, and additional cameras in the high school and middle school. And then, of course, in building the new lower and upper elementary school on the Tecumseh Acres campus, that building would be built with that in mind from the design phase. At the middle school and high school, a vestibule would be created so that upon entry, there is, you're forced to interact with people in an office setting before you could head down a hallway or up or down a stairway and have access to our staff and students. So security is at the front of all of these projects. And then the new lower and upper elementary school would be a kindergarten through fourth grade, but also include our Young Fives program, which is an early branch of our kindergarten group, and potentially house our preschool program, which is currently at Sutton, but we would have to wait until we got to the design phase to make sure that it would fit in the envelope of that square footage. Obviously redesigned the whole auto and bus drop-off on that site at Tecumseh Acres. We would have specialized spaces for art, music, phys ed. I mentioned this last time. In modern school construction, we're no longer using the gym space as also the heating space. For health code reasons and also because our phys ed programs are used throughout the day. We don't shut down the gym for 2.5 hours in a building like this and feed everyone. The cafeteria and the gym can be used all at the same time, and that makes us more efficient in the programming that we present. Instructional technology upgrades, modern design for learning environments. Currently, our classrooms in the elementary are between 800 and 900 square feet. The modern standard for elementary is 1,100 square feet, and then almost 2,000 square feet for kindergarten. So we're quite far behind in those averages. And then, of course, on the outside of the building, the play fields and playgrounds that go along with the space that houses the elementary kids. That's all under proposal 1.
I don't know what a teacher workstation is.
Also, the district-wide security upgrades that I mentioned, better security and door, and then camera and buzzer systems. Right now, the screen that a person at the desk views for the person coming in is about the size of this business card, and that's old technology, so we're hoping to upgrade those things as well. Security technology in terms of how we can filter the internet, but still remain usable in our teacher setting. And then something that was talked about a lot when we presented this the first time was configuring an auto and bus drop-off system that makes sense in a parking area that is safe for everyone who comes in. The nice part about what we did the first time was that through the process, the committee learned that we actually have access to the Union Street side of the Tecumseh Acres campus, and that gives us just a fourth direction to be able to onboard and disperse traffic in the morning and in the afternoon for pick up and drop off. So we don't have a final design of that campus right now, but if things pass on November 8th, we're 4 years away from opening that building. So right away, one of the committees that would form would be that campus design for making sure that we had the right amount of traffic going in the right directions, and would absolutely probably include police and fire here in the community to help us with that design. I also want to mention, it's not in that slide there, but the third piece is that dedicated orchestra space would be constructed just at the end of this hallway. And that includes about a $600,000 donation through the Wilson Foundation. For many years at Tecumseh, there has been a fundraising group called the Friends of Tecumseh Orchestra. And they've had yard sales and day sales and performances and raised money just about every way that they could think of. And the Wilson Foundation has been fortunate in their investing to be able to create this nest egg. And $600,000 would be great if we were building a house, but we're not. We're building 5,000 commercial square feet of classroom, and at $320 a square foot, we're well over $1,000. So 600,000 gets us started, but it doesn't get the whole job done, and we want to be able to finish that because a lot of people have been working on that project for many years. So that is also part of proposal one. I do want to mention, this was a new question on this presentation this year. Somebody said, well, I really like the orchestra and I want it to pass, so why don't we put it on both proposals? The state of Michigan does not allow you to put the same thing on separate proposals. Whatever you put into a proposal, you have to do. So if both issues passed, we would have to build 2 orchestra spaces because we said we were going to do that. And it wouldn't even get to that because the group that approves you in this process at the state level wouldn't allow it to be on there. So it was a nice suggestion, decent strategy thinking, but it just doesn't cut the guidelines. So proposal 2 has some additions here at the high school and the middle school, and also I think one of the most important parts is the improvements to the community pool. We just came off with another 2.5 week downturn. While we waited for one part to the single boiler that heats the water in the pool. The modern standard for running a pool is to have a dual boiler system, so that you can run them both at a half percentage, 50% while they're both working. But if you need to close one down for maintenance or a part, the other one can be brought up and you can seamlessly run the pool without having a boiler issue. And boilers are cheap. They're a few $1,000 a piece. So that is in the bond project and needs to be done. The air handler that circulates the air, takes some of the humidity out, returns some of the heat to the water. That's part of the project too, but also an expensive piece of equipment. So bond money is the most efficient way for a school board to address those sorts of upgrades. Proposal 2 also involves the parking and traffic improvements at TMS. That building has been in service to the district for many years. I believe one of our former teachers and board members, Jimmy Rice, has told me in the past 17 total additions over the life of that building. And each time, it gets a little bit more complicated to get on and off of that campus. And we need a specific design that separates traffic flow from parking areas. Right now, we have situations where kids and staff have to walk through drop-off lines because they park on one side and the building is on the other. So proposal 2 would include improvements, and we're calling that safety as well, an important design flaw that needs to be corrected on that campus. Infrastructure improvements and additional security upgrades. And then the final piece of that is the auxiliary gym addition here at the high school that would be at the south end, adjacent to the gym that is there. Allowing, obviously, during the day, further programming in physical education, but then afterward, our PE spaces in the middle school and high school are constantly used until sometimes 10 o'clock in the evening. And there's just not enough floor space for teams. We had an example of that many times last year where we would have a contest that started at 4 o'clock, but 6 teams that needed to practice. And time had to be shared between those teams to try to get some floor space before the beginning of that contest. So the auxiliary gym just gives a lot of flexibility in our after-school and athletic programs as well. If you're here on a Sunday throughout the fall and winter, we're usually hosting either club volleyball or club basketball in those spaces as well. And each of those clubs just continue to grow in size, and that would be a nice addition for the community use as well. Security again, this would allow us to equip every school with the modern security upgrades The bottom picture there on the left-hand side is that vestibule that forces somebody who buzzes in to report to an office. That is not one of our buildings, but it's very much like our buildings in that the current design was unencumbered access to the building once you enter, and this forces someone to report to an office space before they proceed into the populated areas. Explaining how public schools are funded is very difficult, would probably require another workshop, but basically we have our general fund that is provided through tax dollars to the state of Michigan, and those tax sources are varied. Much of it comes from 2 of the 6 cents in sales tax that consumers pay. Some comes from local property taxes, both commercial and residential. Some of it comes from the state lotteries, and some come from a variety of smaller sources. That is the money that we use to run the whole show, to pay our employees, to buy programming, to provide materials for students, to provide the teachers with the equipment that they need. Currently, we're funded at a level of $9,135 per student. So we're in the count cycle right now, and the count cycle is the most important part of our funding in terms of what we control. The state government sets the dollar amount, and then we have to do the head count. So when your student count comes up, then you have the ability to increase your programming and funding for the things that you're doing for your students. Aside from that, we really don't have any particular way to fund projects of this size and this expense, other than asking the local electorate to vote on increasing the village. And those are 2 completely separate ways of raising money. When you pass a bond issue, you can't pay for people. You can't add additional programming. You can't increase what you're doing in the delivery of instruction. You can only pay for brick and mortar projects on your facilities and your grounds to make improvements or upgrades over time. So that is the basic breakdown of what's a general fund expense and what bonds can pay for. And by passing a bond issue and closing 4 elementaries and condensing down to 1 large elementary, we're no longer maintaining 4 campuses. We're no longer pushing snow and sealing parking lots and repairing sidewalks and roofs and boilers and all the things that you have to do on those 4 campuses. And we're just not that size anymore. It's time to recognize that in Tecumseh, we have gotten smaller in our enrollment. Live births are down and have been down. And when I first started in Tecumseh in 1989, we were graduating 250, 270 kids in a graduating class. Our average now is around 200. Last year was 159. This year is a little bit bigger at 220. But we just don't have the enrollment that we used to have, and now we have 4 small elementary buildings that are spread around in neighborhoods that used to be full of young families, and now most of them are not. So we have inefficient busing patterns, and it all adds to our general fund expense. If we can right size and get ourselves to 3 campuses, our projection is that we're going to save about $1.3 million a year in overhead that can then be put into long-term maintenance budget. It can be put into salaries for our employees, programming and materials for our students, And you compound that over time, $1.3 million a year, it really makes a big difference in our ability to be effective. And that's the third piece of that slogan. If we do not pass the bond, we know that we have about $18 million in facilities needs that have to be addressed. Now, that was numbers as of June. We know what inflation's done since June, so we're probably about $1 million behind on that estimate as of today. And the longer we wait to do these things, the higher that dollar amount is going to grow. I mentioned on the website those tabs for each of those buildings. If you click on those tabs, it shows you just specifically what are the expenses that are coming up in the next 5 years. So that gives folks a deeper dive into, okay, what are you talking about, Rick? What has to be fixed? That information is on that website that tells any voter specifically what it is that we're up against. And the reason, another question that I get is, okay, why are things all coming due at the same time? Well, we did some upgrades to the elementary buildings in 2003 in a bond project, which was great. We rehabbed and refreshed those buildings. But now everything's ready to be replaced at the same time. So we have the expenses of all 4 buildings all coming together at the same time. And that's why the roofs and the air handlers and the boilers, their lifespan is all coming together at this time. There is a likelihood of at least one of those buildings being the target of closing, possibly next year. And our staff gets real nervous when I talk about that. But the board and I are not interested in surprising anybody. It comes across as that it's some sort of a threat or making people feel guilty, but we know that we have expenses, and we know that we don't have a great amount of control on how we generate income. So the board knows that the potential is there for having to reduce one campus in order to pay for the other 3. And that just makes things more difficult for us. The operational savings I mentioned, the $1.3 million, is a relatively conservative estimate in what we would say from heating and cooling efficiencies, less square footage to maintain in the brick and mortar, and then the 4 properties. You're cutting less grass, you're pushing less snow, you're having to maintain fewer things both inside and outside of the building. Now, we do say that, we're not looking at laying off employees in order to close a facility or to open this facility, but over time, as I mentioned, 4 or 5 years out of opening that, where we will have retirements, we will have people to move on, and we can use that attrition model to make sure that by the time the new building opens, that we're the size that we want to be. And that also adds to that efficiency and operational savings. The need for the upgraded environments I've talked about. We've got 60 to 70-year-old buildings. They're just not configured the way that we teach now. They're not on the size that we want to use for the way that we deliver instruction because students learn differently today and that information is onboarded differently. It's not a desk in rows, I talk, you listen model for instruction anymore. It's much more dynamic, there's more movement, there's more rapid change throughout the day in the methods and the modes that the students are learning in. Our current environments work okay, but they work because our people are flexible and they are some of the most creative people that we know. They're the teachers who make it work, but the system needs to work for them instead of against them. And a new design in the elementary would help us do that. So addressing the critical needs, 18 million over the next 5 years, no major investment in TPS since the beginning of 2000, like I mentioned, around 03. I think the bond went through in 01 and we opened the renovated buildings in 2003 to 2004. Each is 60 to 70 years old, which as I approach 60 doesn't sound that old, but in terms of a campus, a school building, and the way that we deliver instruction, it is outdated. I'm missing one slide, but it simply has the information on there about how to contact me and get more information. So I want to talk about the process of how we got here. Like I mentioned earlier, you were part of this presentation in January, and there are some things that are missing that were here in January, and many of the things are the same. So you might be wondering what happened to get us to this proposal 1 and proposal 2 situation. So after the last fund issue in May, the board decided to immediately go back to the public and find out what were they in support of and what did they think needed to be reworked. And it was based on that feedback that we changed a few things. One of the good pieces of information that came out of that was that we were, in the first project, we were going to replace the field turf on the field of the sports stadium. And we had a great question. Why would we mortgage something for 30 years if it's only going to last for 10? Because we know that field turf has to be replaced every 10 to 12 years. So we said, you're right, 100%, we get it. So the board very wisely looked at our budget and said, we're going to budget half of the expense of that field replacement this year and half of next year's budget. It's a project that has to happen in the summer anyway, and our budgets meet in June and July. So they allocated the money out of 2 budgets to take care of that project. One of the other things that was in the project before was a dedicated locker room space outside at the stadium. The board decided to remove that because of the feedback from the surveys and the forums that we did. So we took that out and said, hey, we'll figure out some other way or another time to address that. If that's a barrier, it's not as though we thought that it was a bad idea, but if it's a barrier to getting the other stuff, the security upgrades and the new elementary and the music space here, if that's the barrier, then we'll pull that off the table. And then we prioritized and said to the community, we're going to come right back because we lost in May by 183 votes. So there's obviously a lot of support for this. To be that close, the board, I think, made a good decision and decided we're going to go right back in November. We're going to adjust these programs a little bit. We're going to say, these are our number 1 priorities, and in proposal 2, these are things that we really would love to have and we think that make sense. But based on the community input, maybe others want to have a choice. So we pulled out the pool upgrades and the auxiliary gym and the campus at the middle school and said, based on the community input, they would like to have a choice between those items. And that is how we got here on the road to the November election to give the community an opportunity. So the dollars and cents breaks down like this. You probably know in July that about half of the old bond debt rolled off of the tax rolls, and we went from paying about 7.2 mils to pay 3.6, which is what is currently being levied. If proposal 1 passes, that would increase back to 7.0 mils. Just if proposal 1 passes, and then if proposal 2 passes as well, that goes to 8.4 mils. It's another 1.4 mils. So that's a little bit higher than the 7.2 that was being paid up until June 30th of this year. We have promotional material on the website that shows exactly what that means. If your taxable value is this much, this is the dollars that you would pay in taxes. The one that I've memorized is the home that is worth $200,000 would pay, between the two proposals, about $60 a month more in taxes, in this proposal. So if you look at that and you can adjust your math for a $400,000 home or a $100,000 home, it's about $60 for $100 of SED. And that's how much it increases the taxes in real dollars, which is a question that we get a lot. So that's the why, where, how, and how much of what we're doing this time as opposed to what we were talking about in May. And I'm very happy to hear your comments from the council or board that entertain questions as well.
Well, I think that, a lot of us on the board, we've obviously been very involved with this, so a lot of our questions have been addressed. We've certainly been opened up questions or concerns from our colleagues.
Yes, I'm Ron Wimple from the city of Tecumseh. I guess one question I have is, what is your current enrollment and what do you project the enrollment to be 10 years from now?
We did our enrollment projections from a group called Middle Cities, and they only allow us to project enrollment 5 years in the future. I don't know why that is, but we have to have those enrollment projections when we go to say, what's the state agency's
It's the state treasurer.
State treasurer. So we go to Treasury, and one of the pieces of information that we have to have is start rolling down, it's been a trend, and this is what Middle Cities says our trend will be in the future. Last year, we had about 2,550 kids. On our first day of the count cycle, last week, we were at about 4640. So we picked up a few this year. I mentioned that small graduating class, 159 last year, and we had a bigger kindergarten class. So it looks like the headcount is maybe ahead of where we were last year. But Little Cities is projecting us to continue to do what we've been doing, which is lose around 30 to 40 kids per time before 5 years out. So I think 23, 40 was the number that I saw 5 years out when the projection was. So what our view is that when you upgrade and you build something new, through school choice, you have the opportunity to have, well, you're really investing in kids in the way that or, which would be great for us, stop folks from leaving and choosing other districts. So enrollment is something that you have a little bit of control on, even with the projection.
You may want to talk about underwriting that the state does to make sure that your bond application is appropriately sized, cost, et cetera.
When you go to Treasury, they're saying, we'll give you the credit rating by backing it up on our end to say, yeah, Tecumseh's thought this through, they go through the process, and they basically underrate the process for us to say, this looks like good financial sense, it's in the boundaries of what a school district their size should be doing, and they have to, if they don't approve it, we don't take it to a ballot. So you have to prove to the Department of Treasury that you thought all these things through and financially reliable for the term, which in this case is a 30-year term, to be able to pay for those things. If we didn't give them that assurance, they wouldn't allow us to put it on the ballot. Yes, ma'am. Yes, and I want to make sure that I clarify that again. That is a home whose market value is 200,000. So the SED or the taxable value would be half of that, $100,000. Basic math works out to about $60 a month per 100,000 of SED.
Rick, I think one thing that's important, and I looked at the last time, is we're not allowed, let's say property values go up, and maybe you guys can express better, but if property values go up, we're not allowed to take more money than we've asked for. So that, I mean, so the property values doubled, let's say, over 30 years, then we're still not gonna get 8.4 mils. We're gonna get whatever mils is needed to get that money. It's a little bit different way of thinking of it. It's not set for at that rate for life. It's set at that dollar amount for the duration.
And if we get more industrial.
If we get more industrial, right, that they contribute. So, I mean, that's the most millage it would be. Very important point, because I think some people thought, well, geez, the houses go up, how you can have to be flush with cash. We'll never get more than 88 million.
And one of the other questions that I field up from time to time is, hey, you were asking for 75 million in May, and you weren't raising the tax rate at all, you were staying at 7.2. Now you want to do less by taking out the field turf and the locker room, and you need 88 million. We know why that is. Things are more expensive. In November of 22 dollars than they were when a year ago when the board decided to put the May ballot together. So again, the longer we wait to recognize what size this district should be and what configurations our buildings should be, the more expensive that bill is going to be. The cost of things is not going to get less, at least in the short term. So approving these now, we think is the most efficient way to get these things done. Get ourselves right-sized and more secure and more efficient. And then in terms of what's going to happen with the properties that we own now, that's really no different than when we talked in May. There's money in this bond project to tear those buildings down if we had to. A little over $3 million for the 4 buildings. The only one that we know we're not going to do anything with would be the Tecumseh Acres building, because that sits approximately where the parking lot and drop off will be for the new building. But the other 3 sites, Sutton and Patterson and Herrick Park, would have value, I think, in some other use. But the Department of Treasury forces you to say, hey, if you can't do anything else with this land, what are you going to do with it? You got a bunch of money to deal with it. So there's money in that 88 million that if nothing else happens with those properties, we can spend. But if it doesn't, if we repurpose or if we're able to get somebody else interested in those properties, then that money that was budgeted for carrying those down could go into the project.
Because when I circulate in the community, there's no doubt that people understand that there's critical infrastructure needs at $18 million. I think people understand that. I think they understand the security needs in today's environment. I think they understand, updating the technology that's used in the classroom. That's all pretty well understood. The question always circles back around to why the new building. And if you, take that 62 million and divide it by 4, that's 15 million. If you eliminate a building and divide it by 3, that's over 20 million. Why are they unfit for investment even at like the $20 million level?
I have my answer in mind. Is there anybody on the board that is interested in answering that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep. Make sure, can you guys hear me through the PA? Am I pushing to talk? No. The problem, Dan, is when we start renovating those buildings, there was Tom Hawkins is here. He's probably a better person to talk about it. There's a 2014 study we had done, an assessment on our elementary buildings. Our every one of those buildings is hot water baseboard heat, they radiant heat with water. All of those, the water supply, like the kids drink, there's nothing wrong with. It's the water supply for those boilers. Those lines are old, they're rusted. A lot of the valves underneath there are corroded. There is no crawl space. Those are built on a slab. So though underneath those buildings are what are called tunnels that go underneath there. The insulation around there is asbestos. So that would have to be abated. It's expensive and it's slow. I can't quote you the dollar amount because I haven't looked at it in a couple of years at least. But it's expensive and it's slow. To do those renovations, we had talked about that a couple of years ago. How about just selecting 2 of the buildings, renovate them, go to 4 buildings? Maybe we get by with less money in a sinking fund. There's some, on at least one of the 2 buildings, there's some foundational problems that would have to be addressed. It's not likely that can be done and still run school at the same time. We don't have enough buildings to put the kids somewhere else. Because and I understand where people are, well, you go to Europe and there's 500-year-old school buildings, they're still using them for schools. They aren't big buildings. I had 5 exchange students, 6 exchange students, 5 of them from Europe. I've been to almost all those European towns. They're right, they do that. Their school buildings aren't a whole lot bigger than this cafetorium in general, and they don't go there all day. They go there for a short time. They don't have sports incorporated in their schools. Everything's club, and they don't do a lot of it. So it's a different culture than what we have. To go in and renovate those buildings, and again, this is about making the sustainability, that 1.3 million. When we have right now, we used to have, when I was hired here, when I was a student here, we had 6 elementaries, 7, because we had the Britain Macon building too. If we built this new 1 building and that we were proposing, that would have about 60% of the footprint of the roofs of the existing 4 buildings. So when we get to the point where we have to replace roofs, right away, you've got a big reduction, almost half, just by the fact you only have 1 roof to take care of. That doesn't include the different number of boilers, which Rick talked about, the efficiency of those boilers. But we'll have multiple boilers in these new buildings because that's the new model that's more efficient. I'm sure Brian knows more about that than I do too, on how that sets up. I went and looked at that a couple of years ago at one of the Holland, I think it was Holland Unity Christian School, where they had that set up when I worked for the school. There's a lot of, and I think that 1.3 million, and Greg would correct me if I'm wrong, is probably going to be a bigger number than we think because of the spike in natural gas that's gone on, and probably isn't going to diminish with our energy grid moving from coal to natural gas. I think you're probably going to recoup a bigger amount than that. So to renovate, you really can't renovate those buildings and cancel school for a year so somebody could come in and do it. And and I know with the supply chain issues we've got, that's probably not going to happen very fast with all the money that's been released for schools. We call it ESSER funds. I have no idea what ESSER stands for. It isn't just us that's looking to to invest some of that money for boilers and heating and air conditioning units and making capital repairs on our buildings. Everybody's doing it. You're kind of getting in line for that. Does that answer?
Can I add something else to that? So, the thing about this bond proposal, we're really right-sizing this school system for the future, right? I mean, if it's $1.3 million in savings today, it's going to be a lot more than that 5 years from now, a lot more than that in 10 years from now. I mean, I went and toured these buildings about 3 weeks ago, because I want to see it. A lot of these pictures that were in here, we took them. I mean, when you talk about 18 million, you're not fixing the bricks that are corroding along the outside of the building. The 18 million gets us to running. When I was amazed when I went through these hallways, the amount of supplies that are stored in the hallway, right? I mean, if we start adding more, if we have to right size another way, we start adding more kids to these schools. I mean, the hallways become more congested. I mean, Rick mentioned it, 900 square feet today, 1,100 square feet is the right number. What are they doing now? They're not shoving it 900, they're putting it in the hallways, right? So, I mean, the teachers are great making it work. The floors, the gym floor, the cafeteria floors are never right. And most importantly, I think, is we're creating a school system that will draw people to us. A lot of times we want to look at the other people in our county to the south or here. Well, our competition are the Salines, right? We want people from Saline and Dexter and Chelsea to come to our city, right? And when they come, they're used to a certain level of school and what way school should look. And they see buildings that are old, and it's not that, hey, they're all functional, but we're trying to increase property values. We're trying to make functional. I mean, I go back to on the farm, right? My dad had his old tool shed there, and he loved that tool shed. It was full of all stuff. But my brother tore it down. He built a great big barn. It has a great workshop in it. You can store the equipment in it. We can work efficiently. And when something breaks at 10 o'clock at night, we drive into a barn that's got the right lights, and the tools are all there to fix the thing, right? And that's kind of the difference we're at right now. It happens in industry all the time, and I think that's what we're doing here.
If I can, in the Tecumseh Herald a month ago, I talked about Tecumseh, Robert Duhan, superintendent, Gene Cooley, assistant superintendent. That was heartwarming because they were my superintendent, assistant superintendent. 3,790 students was what they were in projected enrollment for Tecumseh. We're 2,640 now. We didn't do anything wrong to cause that. It's the whole county's down.
State.
Yeah, state. I mean, there's a few growth areas, Saline, Okemos, there's a few districts that have sprouted up, but when they sprout up, that's because 2 or 3 others are going down. And that's why we want to go to this 3-building model. It will help with our property values. It will help with operational expense. You're spending the money now, but you're saving the money over time because we should have more money in our fund equity so we can take care of a lot of these issues that haven't been taken care of in the past. I know I read those, the board this, the board that, and the superintendent this and that. This didn't all start with this board and the superintendent. I mean, this has been if you look at when the bonds went out, this has been a 20-year process. And we just haven't, as a school district, just planned as well as we should. I think it's because typically what school districts looked to get, a bond for some type of renovation. In this case, it's not necessarily renovation. It's to try and streamline things because I went to Tipton Elementary. I can tell you, my mom still had all the little pictures. There were 30 of us in a classroom out there. That's how many we had, but it was kids sitting in rows. It was a different era. But we have to modernize. We have to modernize to compete with the districts around us. When you look at that bond proposal that he put on the website, and you look at how much money all of our competitor schools around us have invested in the 20 years that we've invested zero. The low number is 22 million and the high number is 124 million, 127 million. So we're not trying to hit a home run here. We're just trying to hit a single and stay in the game.
Go ahead.
I just was gonna say, if you went into all the little Lenawee County schools, you would see some secure vestibules from people who have dedicated money, like at a Sand Creek or at a Morenci. Some of the things that we simply don't have in terms of security, which might be surprising to some to think why we don't have that. Our building, they have done some millages there to make that for them, so they are secure.
I was just going to add on to that our SRO can much better handle 3 schools versus 6 schools we've got going on right now. So that plays right into what Mary was talking about with security. It absolutely would make his life a lot easier and our district more secure.
Yeah.
I have an attachment to just about every one of these spaces. I was principal at Herrick Park from 98 to 2003. I love that area. I love coming down there in the morning and watching apples fall from the tree in here, nibbling on the apples. Sorry, I never in the city again. My daughter, my oldest daughter went to Patterson. My wife raised the Helen children for there for 5 years. My 2 younger daughters went to Sutton for 1 year, and then Tecumseh Acres for 4 years. Then a lot of us that have that experience here. Those buildings mean more to us than the ground they're on and the bricks that surround them. The simple truth is that they are configured in a way and they are located in places that are no longer sensible for the way that we do business. They were built in neighborhoods that thrived and teemed with family families and kids. It isn't that way anymore. Now, we fit our program to what the buildings allow us. An educational institution should not let the facilities drive the program. The program needs to drive the facilities. And in 2022 and beyond, our future is under 3 roofs. For programming, for efficiency, for safety, for all of the things that I've mentioned tonight. And there is going to be an upfront cost. But for the years to come into the future, long after I have anything to do with public education, that's the configuration that education in this country needs to be in. 3 buildings, 3 campuses, 3 places to keep kids safe and keep kids learning. That is my why for all of this programming. That is where the future is. Those buildings are in our past, and they're foundational to a lot of our thinking about this great community. But into the future, it's something different that needs to be taken care of sooner rather than later. Yes, ma'am.
This is a pragmatic thing, but if you come to the acres to build one, where will those students go? Will they go into the other 3?
There is enough space on that campus to keep the kids in the building during construction. It's going to reduce probably the greatest playground in Tecumseh to about a third of its size.
Briefly.
But the building can go up and exist while the kids are in school.
Greg, you kind of gave me a decent segue into talking about what I wanted to hit on, just different things I've heard with people that have come and talked to me. You're right, nobody sitting in this room has much to do with the situation with the older buildings. But one thing that a lot of people are really concerned about that have come and talked to me is when you see that 18.4 or 18.1 of repairs, moving forward, we can't fix the past, but moving forward, people really want to know what is going to be done to ensure that the building that we're building now, potentially, the middle school, that's not going to fix everything that needs to be done at the middle school before this bond is paid for. So a lot of people really want to see or know if there's something that can be done. School boards change. It just happens. Superintendents change. It happens. But is there something that can be done to keep the common ground moving forward, saying, okay, out of this 1.3 that we're going to be saving potentially every year, why isn't 1 million of that getting put into a fund that strictly is for capital improvements, not necessarily the day-to-day stuff, but to put this aside and, in hopes that the next time the middle school needs to be remodeled, you're coming and talking to the community about what you want to do, but hey, we've got the money set aside to do that. I think that would go further than anything that has been done in the past 30 plus years with the school system.
You talk about a segue. I called Rick this morning with the same question and said, can we create a policy where we set up a capital repair, capital maintenance fund? And he said it is. I called later on in the day and got a hold of Tim Simpson, who's the chairman of the budget committee, and said, what do you think of this idea? And nobody else has even talked about it. I started with me asking him that question this morning and Tim today. And I think that's what has to be done. I mean,
but I also think that, it's not, we don't talk about history, but I can tell you that the past management of this school district spent a lot of money on things that didn't do that. And it got us way behind, and maybe we can talk offline about that. But there was the capital budgets were not where they are today. The money that we have is this board. And again, boards change, and it'd be great if you could put something in writing that says it has to be this way. I don't know. It's a great idea. Sounds like Greg's working already. But I can tell you that our capital budget was used for other things and got us behind. The other thing I'll tell you is that, we gave our teachers a significant pay increase in the last contract, but we're not there yet, right? We are not there yet. And the same thing happened in past management that kind of got us behind. And we're trying to get caught up with the county because we have the best facilities and we should be able to get the best teachers, but we got to get the pay there as well. So as much as I'd like to say all that 1.3 can go, from what I see about the budget, some of it's got to go to staff because we've got to get our pay closer to par with the rest of the county. So Greg's idea is great. We should look into that to make sure it doesn't happen, but we're paying for some past sins. I will tell you that for sure.
And in order to deal with that, what we need is a reset. And this is the reset.
Yeah.
We can get down to 3 facilities that we have to take care of, and then we establish a policy that says the board must ABC in terms of saving money for the future and repairs. Then that becomes harder to group 10 years from now to make change. And I agree completely that there does have to be the indication that we're not going to go through this again in 20 or 25 years because we didn't make the changes that were necessary. So this board's thinking about it, I'm aware of it, and we need to do those things.
Just as a caveat to that, we certainly have talked about it a great deal, and a policy is a great idea as well. However, as everyone on this board knows, all it takes is a vote to change policy. So it's important to pay attention to who you're voting for when you're setting up the board. People that are like-minded and trying to keep that budget towing the line where it should be. I'm not running, so I can feel safe saying that.
Okay. and
It's not a
just
campaign
really
speech.
grateful for Ed working with us on setting up the meeting. Sorry, Mayor Baker couldn't attend. I know he was very sorry as well. But we thank you for your attendance and your questions, and hope you take a thoughtful approach as you talk about this with others. Like I said, take that information card, take it right to the website. All the information is there, and we'll see what happens come. We'll only get until November 9th, but on that time, we'll hopefully be celebrating and planning the distant future of education.
Oh, yeah.
All right, just a couple things, housekeeping. I mean, I guess it's important. This is a public meeting, so in accordance with the Open Meeting Act, I do want to open up right now for any public comment. I mean, I know the public has asked questions here, but it's very important that we allow for public comment here. So if anyone has a comment about anything, please limit your questions or your comments to 3 minutes. Is there anybody public who would like to make comment? We'll have another opportunity at our next meeting, but it's important that we do that. Kind of in closing, I guess I wanted to say a couple things. We have those little cards that Rick passed out. There's a whole, they're up here on the table. We have lots of them. Take them. Some of the flyers have been in the telegram and in the mail. We have those flyers if you need them. The people ask for information. We're trying to give information. In closing, I just want to say thanks again. Again, we understand that this is not one of your regular board meeting, and we certainly understand this is a time, but we have a regular meeting scheduled next. You're welcome to stay and contribute, or you're welcome to go and have dinner with your family. So we thank you for the time. That I'll adjourn the study session.
I think so.
Let's go home.
The party's not over. You can stay.
We'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance led by our students. Who will introduce in a moment.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I apologize for a little bit of a late start. As most of you probably figured out, we did have a study session with the city council today. And when you get that many politicians in a room, us included, we tend to like to talk, right? So we ran a little long. Before we get to good news, I just want to, one of the parts of our strategic plan, our strategic goals were to have students involved with these meetings. And we again have, this evening, we have 3 students who have are joining us. And I welcome Ella Boatwright, Avery Cluis, and Hannah Stepp. So thanks for coming. Again, we look forward to your input. If you have something to say, just raise your hand or somehow get my attention. We'll get you going. So, that was the good news. Sorry, we had different people. We had different people, Rick. So I took over on that.
Roll on.
All right, go ahead with the good news, Mr. Hilgerly.
Yeah, just as you mentioned, you introduced the students. We continue to get great support from our leadership class. And I don't know, students, what are you hearing reports from the students when they come back from our meetings? Are they reporting to you?
Yeah.
Are they telling you that it's not that scary, that you'll be okay? All right, good. Well, we're glad you're here, and we're going to continue this at each of our meetings. And we've had valuable input each time. So as Mr. Rivatero mentioned, feel free to give us your input and your opinion on things. And I know the board is interested to hear what you have to say. Thanks for coming.
That's it. That's all the good news. All right. Very good. Next on the agenda, public comment on agenda items only. Again, pursuant with Open Meeting Act of 1986. If there's any comment on agenda items, please step forward. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. An agenda item? Pardon me?
She's an agenda.
If it's on the agenda, otherwise we'll have a public comment at the end for anything else, okay? Thank you. Anybody else? All right, with that, we'll move on to the board agenda. I have just one revision that I'd like to add. I'd like to add a discussion concerning the creation of a safety committee.
Okay. I also have an addition for a grant, 98C learning loss grant.
So you want a discussion on a
98C.
98C learning loss grant. So you want to add a discussion for that?
Yep.
Okay.
Any other additions, deletions? All right. Then I move to revise the agenda to add discussion items for discussing the creation of a security committee and discussion regarding a 98C grant for learning loss.
Support.
It's been moved and seconded to add a discussion for a safety committee and discussion on 98C learning loss grant. Roll call vote, trustee Brooks,
Aye.
trustee Davis,
Aye.
trustee Lewis,
Aye.
trustee Simpson,
Aye.
trustee Tomlin,
Aye.
chair votes aye. Those are added to the agenda. I now accept a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Support.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the revised agenda. Roll call vote, trustee Tomlin,
Aye.
trustee Simpson,
Aye.
trustee Lewis,
Aye.
trustee Davis,
Aye.
trustee Brooks.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The revised agenda is approved. Thank you. Next on the agenda, scheduled reports. We'll start off with Mr. Lewis on the curriculum committee.
We did, the curriculum committee meeting was longer than usual. The beginning of it was an impassioned hearing from 2 of the teachers regarding their thoughts about instructional coaches. It went longer than what I let's say we bought into it before it was finished. It was very good
They did
feedback,
TPS.
very good input. But it did consume a lot of the meeting. And I did not put the notes in, just because after, I would have been the bulk of my notes, but Megan did present to us as well. I think the important thing is she's got her first curriculum review, science and social studies. They met to review timelines. And science is beginning a pilot from McGraw-Hill. Kristen Hess, that's for grade 6 and 7. Kristen Hess is leading that. The coaches are leading the monthly ELA meetings. And those ELA meetings, those focus mainly on curriculum associates that we picked up, that curriculum we picked up from them.
And the middle school curriculum, yeah.
Okay. And, she's been working on the CTE issues that we have. We've got to set a strategic planning process that we want to have some CTE classes put together, not certainly for this school year, but maybe for 22, 23. It's kind of already started with Ryan McDowell. In fact, there was an email today from him. They sent out, and that's he's working on that process with Megan's guidance. There's another one for building trades that she's looking at, and I think she's just getting her feet wet and all this, and how that process works. And again, for those of you that never hadn't worked in education, it doesn't always have to be as slow as it is, but it is cumbersome because you're talking about taking pots of money from other people, and when you do that, then you're infringing on somebody in some way or another. But what we're here to do is make sure we do what's right for Tecumseh students. And not that we want to bulldoze anybody, but we're going to get done what we think needs to get done. Career exploitation is coming up. One of the things I thought was interesting, I was surprised when I saw it, there's career exploration classes and presentations beginning in K2. That shocks me because I have 2 grandsons in 2nd grade, and I think you have to tell them to brush their teeth and make sure their hair's combed and tie their shoes before they get out the door. But if they can make inroads, I know their parents would love it. There's broken down the K2 buildings, the 3-4 buildings, the middle school and the high school. There's that continuing career units that are going through, so kids have some idea what they may want to do, or at least get to talk to people. That includes some speakers coming in with them, some set up via Zoom. I think that pretty much covers it. Is there anything you'd like to add, Megan? Mary? Becky?
I think you touched on it all pretty good.
Okay, well, you know.
Any questions for Mr. Lewis? Thank you. Next is the scheduled report is Trustee Davis, the Facilities Committee.
We had a good facilities team meeting on 10/4. We talked about, got an update on ESSER and 11T funding from Mrs. Glenn, and what that looks like from Mr. Smith on some of the projects that we're looking at. Once all that money is available, that'll come out in front of the board. We also had a very good discussion with the IT department, facilities department, and Officer Rogers about building security updates, applying for a grant proposal that would allow us to do a full security assessment and mapping. And that in the interim, principals will continue to share the requirement of no prop doors. I felt that was important to say, no propped doors. But we asked them to go back, and lots of discussion about the bond and what would happen if the bond passed. But we asked them to go back and look at the list of items that they had identified and prioritize those so that for some reason the bond doesn't pass and we know how to prioritize. But I think we had also talked about a safety team, maybe, or a safety committee. So we're glad to see that added to the discussion items. And then we also restarted the conversation about middle school and high school facility updates, especially in the areas of hygiene. And we made a request. Actually, Mr. Smith is already working on some inspections, which we were happy to hear about. And we've asked that they just keep us updated on that moving forward. So that's it.
Thank you, and thank you for your report was in the packet. I appreciate that. It gives me time, personally appreciate it, gives me time to read. Does anyone have any questions for Trustee Davis or the Budget Committee? Sorry, the Facilities Committee? All right, then we'll move on to the Budget Committee with the Trustee Brooks, Chairman. Oops.
It's all right, Greg, I forgive you. So we also discussed with Chad and Tom and Devin about the security and technology and all that stuff that pretty much sounds like the Facilities Committee talked about. So that was pretty much covered already. The other thing we talked about was the item that I added to the discussion item, so I don't want to go too deeply into it. But there is a grant opportunity for us to capture some funds that is specifically designed for learning loss. And Kelly was getting some more information about it, and I think she'll probably touch on that more when we get to that in discussion.
So in general, the budget is solid. I mean, things are,
We were in the middle of an audit last week, and that audit report will be coming to us in November. So yes, as far as we know, our audits usually go pretty well. And we are getting some more information together to kind of finalize the ESSER and 11T money. I asked Kelly to try to get that, we were kind of talking about when that would be available. And I said, I really would like to see that available if we can before the election. Because I've heard a couple of times, you got all this government money. Okay, well, it's not exactly how it works. Yes, we did get more pots of money than we normally do, but a lot of them were specifically allocated to or earmarked for very specific things. So I asked that they try to get that together before the election so that we kind of have a more defined idea of what that money is for, what it can be used for, what it has been used for, and have that information available in a public meeting. Yes, that's what I needed, prior to the election day.
thank you. Any questions for Trustee Brooks and the Budget Committee? No, again, thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to discussion items. The first is the added of the Safety Committee. As we've heard from both the the Facilities Committee and the Budget Committee, and in our presentation at the study session, safety is a huge concern with this board. And I think given the state of the world today is important. So because we had budgeted around $400,000 late at the end of late school year, early summer, and just understanding that regardless of what happens with the bond, we need to continue to do this. It's been recommended by Officer Rogers, who I think has left, and many others, that we create a safety committee. You called it something else. You called it a
Safety Security
Committee. So I, after speaking with all the members, think that that's another committee. Not that we all need more meetings, because as I've said many times, we are attending a lot of meetings, but I think that this is too important not to. So I guess I'd like to open it up for discussion to the rest of the board. We have a couple board members who have maybe volunteered, I guess I'll use that word, to be on that committee. But I guess before we get there, I'll set those. I want to have a discussion and see if you agree that it's needed.
I mean, go ahead. I was just going to say, as the chair of the Facilities Committee, we have a lot of discussion about it. Mr. Simpson shares his positive views of having a committee like that. So I think from my perspective, I think it's a good idea to have that for two reasons. Again, regardless of the bond, we need to move forward with that. But I'll say when the bond passes, I'm being positive tonight, when the bond passes, that's a whole nother set of discussions of how to design that. And there are buildings that we want to get started on safety and security almost immediately. So I think I'm positive for that concept. I'm not volunteering for the committee, but unless you need me. But I do think that's a good idea based on the discussions we've had both in facilities and budget.
I just wondered, in terms of Officer Rogers, this is something that he's very supportive of. He would be a
Absolutely.
regular attendee of this meeting and maybe help, like, we look to Megan for curriculum. He would be helping us, chair that and go
Yeah, he,
through all
he
the
has
components.
personally spoke to me about
Perfect.
this. Yes.
We actually kind of assigned it to him in the facilities.
I like that idea very much. It's important.
Did Chad bail?
Yeah, yes.
Of course. I think the intent would be for Devin, Chad, and Tom to all be pretty involved.
Right.
Mr. Hilderling?
Yeah, I would say, having been a part of two different discussions on the issue, that a very simple thing for the board to do. It doesn't take any board action. The president can identify the members who are interested and establish that. You can have it as a standing committee or an ad hoc committee. It can meet as needed when topics present themselves. So I think it's a fairly simple thing for the board to do and very advisable.
Good. Yeah, I agree that it's something we do, and I will proceed to create this committee. I know that Trustee Brooks and Trustee Lewis have both volunteered to be on this committee, probably Trustee
I
Brooks.
volunteered to kick it off.
To kick it off, right. And I'm sure you said that today when we talked.
Yeah, I
Greg.
said something, voluntold, is that?
Yeah, voluntold, I think is the word, but thank you very much, and I will also, for the time being, attend these as well. So, any other comments? All right, next on the discussion is 98C Learning Loss Grant. Mrs. Brooks?
Mrs. Green?
Mrs. Green?
Good evening, Board. Public Act 144 of 2022 established learning loss funds. It's called Section 98C. This is a grant available for all public schools and academies to apply for. It is per pupil funding. However, I can't tell you how much per pupil funding Tecumseh would be allotted. It's basically whoever applies, they'll look at the state will look at the applications and split the pot of money accordingly on a per pupil basis. However, the state did throw a lot of 52 million towards this project. So, it could be some significant funds. We'll have to wait and see how many other school districts apply. There are certain criteria. The application is due November 30th. And the criteria is we have to assure, the district has to assure not later than October 30th, 2022 at a public meeting of the board. A presentation is provided on how funding is received under Section 98C and how it will address learning loss. We also have to put a link to the address of learning loss plan on our website when that's available, and then a brief description of the metrics that are used to determine the impact the district will have on these funded initiatives. The funds should arrive once they're allocated in the early winter state aid payments. And like I said, it's that they have also various items that would be allowable under the plan, hiring additional teachers to reduce class size, hiring assessments. I know Ms. Way had some suggestions already that maybe she might be able to share, but I know it's something the district would like to take advantage of.
So what do you need from the board?
Just discussion this evening on public
Yeah,
input.
basically, we're in the middle of doing what we have to do to qualify. It has to be an agenda item for board discussion and open for public comment.
Does anyone on the board have a question?
Well, since we talked about this at the last board meeting, this is very timely to have money to put into it, especially to reduce teacher classroom sizes and continue maybe even some of the amazing summer school programming that we have that we might not have money for in the future.
Yeah, I personally, with full support for this, right? Learning loss is something we discussed at the last board meeting. I know Ms. Davis is something that's very near and dear to her heart, and it is very timely. So I support it, and I think in general, the board does as well. I'm seeing lots of head shaking, yes. So thank you, and please carry on as diligently as possible. All right, we do have an action item for the preschool wage benefits. I mean, since this agenda was created, I've been made aware that the policy committee has not met. I thought they met last week. The policy committee was not able to meet, so as chair, I'm not ready to entertain a motion on this because of the fact that the policy committee still has some work to do on that. We absolutely will have a meeting before next meeting, and we absolutely need to address it this the next meeting. But as a chair, I'm not ready to accept a motion on this.
Our meeting is scheduled for Wednesday this week at 5 o'clock, so we should have it covered and ready for the 24th.
Point of order.
Yes.
Do we need to have a motion to table till the next board meeting, since we didn't change it off the agenda?
Yes. I'm not accepting a motion on this right now. So, yeah, let's do that. Accept
So
a motion to table.
Say, I move to table until
Well,
next.
then I'll make a motion to table the current action item of the preschool employees' wage and benefits.
Support.
We move the second to table the preschool wage and benefit action item. Roll call vote, trustee Davis,
Aye.
trustee Lewis,
Aye.
trustee Simpson,
Aye.
trustee Tomlin,
Aye.
trustee Brooks.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The item is tabled. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Which includes the minutes from the regular board meeting.
I move,
Sorry.
now I totally lost train of thought to me. I move to accept the consent agenda with minutes from the regular board meeting of September 26, 2022.
Support.
Moved and seconded to support the consent agenda. Roll call vote, trustee Simpson,
Aye.
trustee Lewis,
Aye.
trustee Davis,
Aye.
trustee Brooks,
Aye.
trustee Tomlin.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The consent agenda is approved. Mr. Hilderly, superintendent report.
The only thing that I have is actually a request, not a report. It's been mentioned a couple of times tonight, and I am suggesting that before the October 24th board meeting, that we have a data workshop to take a little bit deeper dive into not only the information that Mrs. Way presented last meeting, but answer some of the standing questions that board members may have, and also provide a little bit more information about this learning loss grant and how we might approach it. So I'm suggesting a 6:15 workshop prior to the October 24th meeting, if everyone is available for that.
Is 6:15 enough time?
I think that we can cover it in 45 minutes.
Okay. I know that I have received comments from several board members that they're in support of this, but I guess, does anybody have a comment or weigh in on support? Does the board support that study session?
Absolutely.
All right.
And any
So-
questions that any of the board members would like to have us look into, Megan and I have already talked about it a couple of times, the format, the information. She has some good data that she wants to give in addition to what she's already provided. So in the next week or so, if you can just send me some information in terms of questions, and we'll make sure that we have it ready.
Is this learning loss related to COVID, or is this over the summer learning loss? And
Specifically related to the pandemic, I believe is what Mrs. Davis was talking about at the last meeting. And we've already collected some decent information that I think will be important for the board to know about.
And I suspect that's what the grant was designed for.
Correct. The learning loss grant is actually funded out of the governor's gear funds and also ESSER 2. So, and those are both pandemic related.
All right.
So we'll put that on the agenda and make people aware that we're going to do that at 6:15 in 2 weeks.
All right. Thank you, Rick. So item scheduled for next agenda is that study session. We will have some good news and some superintendent report, as well as the preschool wage and benefit action item. We expect that the policy committee will have met, and they will present us with a finalized policy for that. Closing now, public comment, again, in accordance with the Open Meeting Act 1986, providing opportunity for public comment. Please note that per our policy, we are limiting comments to 3 minutes. I will set a timer once you start talking. I think we have a public comment, please. All right,
There's a button on that microphone, just push it until it's green.
Okay, is that better?
Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. My name is Lisa Howland. I'm going to skip a lot of things, and I'm not asking for a resolution this evening. I'm just asking that I can attempt to bring something to your attention. For 27 years, I owned and ran a daycare preschool center. In order to do that for 27 years, I needed hundreds and hundreds of hours of credit through LISD, hundreds of CPEs through the state of Michigan. I am now employed through EduStaff. EduStaff does not see those as university credits. So I had to come on board as a paraprofessional. I have no problem with that. I just got back out of the corporate world, going back to my love of children. I knew that would be an extensive pay cut. I knew that was coming. That's all right. I asked all summer for EduStaff to tell me what my pay would be. That was to no avail. There was no answer. So I was kind of shocked when I got my first paycheck from EduStaff. There is a copy of my first paycheck. There is a copy of all of your elementary first pages. You are lucky. Tecumseh Elementaries are so wonderful. I can't even begin to explain it. I feel like I'm in a home. I'm in a house. Your staff is so loving and so caring. I went to Adrian. My children went to Adrian. I sub at Adrian. I don't want to leave Tecumseh. I don't want to make it a money choice. But you have slapped me in the face. I didn't even know there were jobs under $10 an hour anywhere. I mean, I seriously didn't even think that was a thing. I Googled, what does Tecumseh pay at McDonald's? Minors can work at McDonald's for $12 an hour. It's up to 16. I put that in here. I go to Adrian, I have to work with 3 kids, but it's $13, $14 an hour. I don't have parent support in Adrian. I don't really have teacher support. I love your staff. I don't want to make it a money issue. Please, don't make me have a money issue. When I first saw it, I called EduStaff. I said, this has to be a typo. You guys had to do this as a typo. Somebody forgot a number. They said, no. Tecumseh pays $9.87 an hour for a paragraph. So I asked Siri, what's the minimum wage in Michigan? She said, the minimum wage is $9.87. I had to start laughing because I was going to cry. I know what I'm worth. I've been a legal secretary. I just got out of the corporate world as a computer programmer. I programmed robots that got steel for the big 3. I knew I was taking a humongous paycheck, but I'm not minimum wage, and your kids aren't minimum wage. So please don't put that price tag on our head. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Yeah, if you want to leave those with Veronica, she'll get them distributed to us. Thank you. I don't think there's any other public comment. Board member comments, discussion. Anyone from the board?
Make
I just, I'm excited to hear about the learning loss funds. But I'm also really excited to hear about what's coming from Mrs. Way on curriculum. So I think the monthly meetings for the ELA curriculum are critical. We had a large meeting at Toyota on Friday with University of Michigan, Eastern Michigan University, and Washtenaw Community College, and I'd say 80% of the conversation circled around teachers and the support needed to implement the new curriculum that's needed to kind of get our kids moving towards the future. So super excited by that, and super excited about career exploration K through 2 because studies are showing they actually start deciding what they can't do in the 3rd grade. So we need to make sure that when that first kind of testing hits, right, they're starting to decide. So getting them excited before then is really important. So just thank you to Mrs. Way and the staff for kind of pushing through on those big changes and implementing the curriculum the way they are.
Anything from our student body?
And the students are attending. Any comments?
Students, I'll put you on the spot because I'm interested. We've talked a lot about safety in our buildings tonight. And I'm just interested from your perspective, what makes you feel safe and what makes you feel unsafe at any particular time? Is there anything that each of you would be willing to talk about?
I personally feel most safe because Mr. Rogers is in the building. He is a very close friend of mine. I go in and I can talk to him about anything that I need help with, within school, out of school, and he always listens and he's always there for me to try and help me and guide me in the best way possible.
Okay, great. What do you think?
I feel the most safe with my teachers. I have a few teachers that I'm very close with, and I can tell them all my problems, and they just listen, and they're great support systems.
Supportive.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, great.
No pressure.
I feel safe when I go to the elementary buildings. I go there for leadership, and as soon as I buzz in, they say like, state your business or what are you here for, and they ask me to show their IDs, and I think that's really important. It doesn't happen as much as the high school, so I think that we just need to have a little bit more security here. And while Officer Rogers does do a lot here, he's one person, and we're a whole high school.
Okay, great. Appreciate
Great to
your
know with the elementary school.
thoughts on it.
Any other comments? Listen, I don't think we could leave this board meeting without wishing congratulations to the Tecumseh High School football team
Absolutely.
and the staff. I mean, SECY champs, certainly beating Chelsea on their home field. That's just
That was huge.
so congratulations from the board to all of them. And I'm sure at some point we'll come in face to face, but I just didn't feel like we could pass this opportunity.
Also, this is timely because our equestrian team won its 2nd straight regional, and they're preparing for the state competition, I think, this coming weekend. And we're going to have that group here for some good news once their season is all wrapped up.
Very cool.
All right. Any other comments? All right, then I'll accept the motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
The move and second to adjourn the meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone.